I stayed silent for 30 days after finding out about his affair. Then, I chose the worst possible moment to speak full story. I never thought I'd be sharing my story on a platform like this, but here I am. I'm a 40-year-old mom, and I recently discovered that my husband of 15 years has been having an affair. I found out about a month ago, and it's been a whirlwind of emotions since then. I've been feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I've spent countless hours thinking about what to do next, and I've finally decided to confront him about it. I'm not sure how he'll react, but I know I need to do this for myself and for our 2 children. I'm hoping that by sharing my story here, I can get some advice and support from others who have gone through similar situations. Wish me luck, and thank you for taking the time to read my story. The thing is, I didn't just confront him quietly in the privacy of our bedroom the way a rational person probably would have. I confronted him at his mother's birthday dinner. In front of his parents, his 2 brothers, their wives, and our kids. And now half of his family thinks I'm a monster, and the other half won't stop calling me to say they always knew he was no good. So yeah, here we are. I need to back up, because if I just drop the confrontation scene on you without the full context, I know exactly what you're going to think. You're going to think I'm unhinged. And maybe you're right. But I want you to understand exactly what I lived through over the past several months before you make that call, because I promise you, by the time you get to the end of this, you're going to understand why I snapped the way I did. My husband's name is Derek. We met when I was 24 and he was 26. I was finishing my master's degree in education. He was working as a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm. We met at a mutual friend's 4th of July party, standing in line for the same cooler of beer, and he made me laugh so hard I snorted. I remember thinking, okay, that's embarrassing, and I don't even care. That's how charmed I was. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. Married at 26, first baby, our daughter Lily at 28, second baby, our son Marcus at 31. I teach 5th grade at an elementary school about 12 minutes from our house. Derek eventually became a senior project manager and then a regional director. Our life from the outside looked genuinely good. Nice house, not fancy but comfortable. 2 healthy, smart, funny kids. Date nights when we could manage them. The kind of marriage where you fight about who forgot to buy dish soap, and then laugh about it 20 minutes later. That was us. For a long time, that was sincerely, honestly us. I don't know exactly when things started to shift. I've been picking through my memories like someone searching for something they lost in a junk drawer, turning things over, squinting at them in different light. And I think, if I'm being honest with myself, it started about 2 years ago, maybe a little longer. Derek started working later. Not occasionally, not here and there the way he always had when a project was in crunch mode, but consistently. Regularly. A pattern that established itself quietly, the way mold grows in a corner you don't look at often enough. I didn't say much at first. He was stressed about a big commercial development project his company had landed, and I knew the pressure was real. I took on more of the household logistics. I picked up the kids more, managed more of the homework and the dinners and the bath and bedtime routine. I told myself this was temporary. This was what you did for your partner when they were under pressure. This was marriage. But then the project finished, and the late nights didn't. I mentioned it once lightly, about 14 months ago. I said something like, hey, the Henderson project wrapped up, does that mean you'll have a little more breathing room? And he said yes, absolutely, he was going to make more of an effort to be home for dinner. And for maybe 3 weeks he was. And then it crept back. The late nights, the distracted expression at the dinner table, the phone always face down or in his pocket, the way he'd sometimes laugh at a text message, and then go completely neutral the second he realized I was looking at him. Looking back, I was in denial. I think I knew something was wrong and I chose not to know it, if that makes any sense. Because knowing it meant dismantling everything. Knowing it meant looking at my 2 kids and figuring out how to explain something that no parent ever wants to explain. So I kept my head down and I kept hoping it was stress, or a rough patch, or something that would pass. The thing that finally cracked the denial open wasn't dramatic. It was embarrassingly small. I was doing laundry, just a normal Tuesday afternoon. Marcus was at soccer practice, Lily was at a friend's house, and I was emptying Derek's jacket pockets before putting it in the wash. He always leaves stuff in his pockets. Receipts, chapstick, loose change. I'm used to fishing things out. But this time I pulled out a receipt from a restaurant called Olio and Vine. It's this Italian place about 40 minutes from our house, kind of tucked away, not somewhere we'd ever been together. The receipt was for dinner for 2, a bottle of wine, dessert. The total was just over $200. I stood there in the laundry room, holding this little slip of paper, for probably 5 full minutes. The date on it was a Thursday night, 3 weeks earlier. A night Derek had told me he was at a work dinner with contractors from a new project in Cedarville. I put the receipt back in my pocket. I put the jacket in the wash. I folded the rest of the laundry and made dinner, and helped Marcus with his math homework, and watched half an episode of a show with Lily before she went to bed. And the whole time, that receipt felt like it was burning a hole through my pocket. That night after Derek fell asleep, I went through his phone. I'm not proud of it. I know that's not a cool thing to admit. I'd never done it before, not once in 15 years. But I was standing in our bathroom at midnight, heart pounding like I'd been running, and I picked up his phone from the nightstand and typed in his passcode, our anniversary, God, the irony, and I found everything. Her name was Cassandra. They'd been texting for almost 8 months. The messages were, I'm not going to describe them in detail because honestly I still can't think about them without my hands shaking, but I'll just say they were unambiguous. This was not an emotional connection that hadn't crossed a physical line. This had crossed every line, multiple times a week by the look of it. She worked at an architecture firm that had contracts with Derek's company. That's how they met. I read until I felt physically ill. Then I put the phone down exactly where I'd found it, went to our guest bathroom, sat on the floor with my back against the bathtub, and cried as quietly as I've ever cried in my life. The month that followed was one of the hardest of my life. I made a decision, almost immediately, that I wasn't going to react impulsively. I'd read enough stories from other women to know that the worst thing you can do is confront in the heat of the moment, before you have a plan, before you've thought through what you actually want. So I sat with it. I gathered myself. I called my best friend, Rachel, and told her, and she sat on my kitchen floor with me for 4 hours on a Saturday while the kids were at Derek's parents' house, and she didn't try to solve anything. She just let me fall apart, and then helped me put myself back together enough to function. I also quietly called a divorce attorney, just to understand my options, just to know where I stood. That felt like the most adult, most devastating phone call I've ever made. I watched Derek during that month, and the thing that kept grinding at me, the thing that made it harder and harder to stay quiet, was how normal he acted. How completely, utterly normal. He'd come home, ask about the kids' days, complain about traffic, watch TV beside me on the couch. He rubbed my shoulders once when I said I had a headache. He rubbed my shoulders, while he was texting her, while he was lying to my face every single day. The anger that had been simmering started to boil. I'd planned to confront him privately. I want to be very clear about that. My original plan was to wait until the kids were at sleepovers. I'd started engineering weekend plans for them in advance, and have the conversation at home, just the two of us, calm and prepared, and with the evidence laid out clearly. What I had not planned for was what happened at Derek's office, holiday party 4 weeks after I found out. His company threw their annual party at a hotel downtown. I'd gone every year for over a decade. I always liked it, a chance to get dressed up, see the people Derek talked about, feel like I was part of his world in some tangible way. This year I almost didn't go. But then I thought, if I don't go, he'll know something is wrong, so I got dressed. I did my hair. I put on the black dress he'd always said was his favorite. We were there about an hour when I saw her. I didn't recognize her at first. She was standing near the bar with a group of people, laughing at something, wearing a deep green dress. Pretty. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair. And then I saw Derek's face when he spotted her across the room, this quick, complicated flicker that I can only describe as someone trying very hard to look like they've seen nothing, and I knew. She didn't know who I was. She looked right at me at one point, smiled that polite party smile you give strangers, and moved on. Derek spent the rest of the night maneuvering us to different parts of the room. He was smooth about it. Practiced. I held it together for the entire party. I made conversation. I laughed at the right moments. I ate a few things off of passing trays. And on the drive home, I sat in the passenger seat and stared out the window and thought about how thoroughly, how artfully, this man had been lying to me. My careful, private confrontation plans started to unravel. The birthday dinner was 2 weeks later. Derek's mother, Carol, was turning 70. She'd been planning this dinner for months, her favorite restaurant, the whole immediate family, a big deal. Carol and I have always had a good relationship. She's one of those mothers-in-law who genuinely welcomed me from the start, who remembered things I mentioned in passing, who made me feel like I was her daughter as much as her daughter-in-law. The thought of what this night was going to do to her, to all of them, did genuinely give me pause. But then I thought about my daughter Lily, who was 13 and had started noticing that her dad seemed distracted. Who'd said to me, just the week before, "Is everything okay with you and Dad? You guys seem weird." 13 years old and already picking up on the wrongness, already being asked to absorb the fallout of something she hadn't caused and didn't deserve. And I thought about Marcus, who was 10, and who worshipped his father in the uncomplicated way that 10-year-old boys worship their dads, and who had no idea that the man he was building a Lego set with every Sunday was living a double life. And I thought about myself, 40 years old, 15 years, the laundry and the dinner and the bedtimes and the career I'd scaled back when we decided I'd take the lead on childcare during the early years, the shoulder rub when I had a headache. I went to the birthday dinner. I sat at that table, and I ate bread, and I clinked my wine glass, and I watched Derek tell a story about a project in Cedarville that made everyone laugh, and something in me went very, very still. Carol was opening her cards and small gifts. We'd all agreed to keep it modest. The big gift was the dinner itself, and the table was warm and happy and full of the particular ease of people who have known each other for decades. Derek's brother Patrick was teasing his wife, Gwen, about something. Derek's other brother, Scott, was trying to get Marcus to eat his vegetables. It was, by every visible measure, a lovely family dinner. And then Carol looked at me and said warmly, the way she always said things warmly, "Melissa, you've been so quiet tonight. Everything okay, honey?" And I looked at Derek. He was watching me with this expression. I don't know how to describe it exactly. Careful. Like a person who has gotten very good at reading a situation and adjusting in real time. Like a man who had been managing me from a distance for the better part of a year. I said, "Actually, Carol, I'm not doing great. I found out about a month ago that Derek has been having an affair." The silence was extraordinary. The kind of silence that has actual physical weight. Derek said my name, just my name, Melissa, in a tone that was somehow both a warning and a plea. I kept my eyes on Carol because I couldn't look at him. I said, "I'm sorry to do this tonight, I genuinely am. I know this isn't what you planned for your birthday." My voice was steady, which surprised me. But I've been sitting with this for a month, and I've been sitting at this table for 2 hours, and I couldn't do it anymore. I'm sorry. Carol's husband, Robert, said, "What?" in the voice of someone who genuinely hasn't processed the sentence. Lily had gone completely still beside me. Marcus was looking between me and his father, with the expression of a child who understands that something serious is happening, but not yet what. Derek pushed back from the table and said, in a low voice, "This is not the place." You should have thought about that before, I said, which I know how that sounds. Patrick's wife Gwen said quietly, oh my god. What followed was messy. There's no other word for it. Derek denied it initially, in this rapid, almost reflexive way, and then I said Cassandra's name and the denial stopped. Just stopped, mid-sentence, like someone had cut a wire. And the look on his face in that moment told everyone at the table everything they needed to know. Carol started crying. Robert put his hand on her arm and looked at Derek with an expression I will never forget as long as I live. Scott took Marcus to the restroom. I was and still am grateful for that Scott had the presence of mind to get my son out of the room. Lily sat beside me with her hands in her lap and didn't say a word. Derek and I argued, loudly at the table for probably 4 minutes, which felt like 40. He called me manipulative. He said I'd ambushed him. He said I'd chosen his mother's birthday specifically to humiliate him. He was not entirely wrong about any of that, and the part of me that was still thinking clearly registered that fact, even in the middle of everything. I said, you've been lying to our family for 8 months. You've been lying to me for 8 months. You want to talk about humiliation? Patrick, who I've always liked, who has always been the quieter of the two brothers, said to Derek, very calmly, is it true? Derek didn't answer, which was of course its own answer. We left separately. I drove home with both kids, Carol having insisted through her tears that Derek should not be in the car with me that night. The drive home was silent in a way that was different from normal silence. Lily looked out the window the whole way. Marcus fell asleep in the backseat. I kept both hands on the wheel and breathed. That was 6 days ago. Since then, Derek has been staying at his brother Scott's house. Lily knows the full outline of what happened, not every detail but enough. Marcus knows his dad is staying somewhere else for a little while and that his parents are having some problems. We've been trying, imperfectly, to protect him from the worst of it, though I know there's a limit to how much you can really shield a kid. I've had calls from what feels like everyone. Carol called me twice, once to say she was devastated and loved me and didn't know what to say, and once to gently, carefully suggest that maybe the birthday dinner hadn't been the right venue, that Derek's behavior was inexcusable but that she was worried about what Lily had witnessed, and whether I was okay. She was not cruel about it. She was, even in the middle of her own pain, trying to be fair to everyone, which is exactly the kind of person Carol is, and one of the reasons this whole thing hurts as much as it does. Patrick texted me to say he had no idea, and he was furious at Derek. Gwen sent a voice message that was mostly just crying, which I understood. Scott texted to say Derek was staying with him, but that his allegiance was with me and the kids, and also asked what kind of snacks Marcus liked, because he was about to let him raid the pantry. Rachel has been over almost every day. She keeps bringing food. I keep telling her she doesn't have to do that. She keeps ignoring me and showing up with containers of soup. Derek has texted me several times. He's asked to talk. He's apologized once, in a text, in a way that felt like a rough draft of an apology rather than the real thing. He has not, as far as I know, ended things with Cassandra, though I haven't asked. There are conversations ahead of us that I'm not ready to have yet. The thing that keeps me up at night, one of the things, there are several, is Lily's face at that dinner table. She's 13. She's old enough to understand what she heard. She's old enough to feel the specific, jagged betrayal of realizing that a parent she trusted has been deceiving the family. And I put her in the room for that. I made that choice. I've been asking myself, over and over, whether there was a version of this where I handled it better. Whether the need to not be alone with my secret for one more minute, the need to make it real in a room full of people who would remember, was about protecting myself rather than protecting my kids. Whether I was angry enough, by the end, that the confrontation was about hurting Derek rather than about the truth. I genuinely don't know. I think it was both things, maybe. I think it was the truth and the anger, so tangled together that I couldn't separate them by the time I got to that table. Some people online, when I've described this in other spaces, have called me a hero. They've said Derek deserved it and worse. They've said Carol and the whole family needed to know that cheaters rely on the privacy they've been granted, that pulling back the curtain in front of people who love him was the only language he was ever going to understand. Others have said I was cruel, that I used his mother's birthday as a weapon, that Lily should never have been there, that the kids were collateral damage in what was, essentially, an act of revenge. Both of these things feel partially true to me, which is, I think, the honest answer and also the least satisfying one. Derek built this bomb. He built it carefully, over 8 months, out of lies and late nights and face-down phones and a receipt in a jacket pocket from a restaurant 40 minutes away. I didn't build the bomb, but I chose when and where it went off, and I chose a crowded room. I keep coming back to Lily's face. I keep coming back to Marcus waking up in the backseat and asking if we were home yet, his voice still soft with sleep, innocent of everything that had just happened around him. I keep coming back to Carol, who turned 70 surrounded by her family, which is what she'd wanted, but not like this. And I keep coming back to Derek's face when I said Cassandra's name. That stopped expression. That moment when the performance of normalcy, so long sustained, finally dropped. I don't regret telling the truth. I think I need to say that clearly. I needed to stop carrying this alone. I needed the lie to be out loud rather than just inside my chest. I needed the people who shared Derek's life to know what kind of person had been sitting at their tables and sleeping in their guest rooms and accepting their birthday hugs. But I'm not sure about the how. I'm not sure about the where. I'm not sure about my daughter's face. I'm not sure I gave myself enough distance from the anger before I acted. And I know that a little more time, a little more distance, might have meant doing this differently. A little more time, and I might have found a way to protect my kids more completely and still get the confrontation I needed. Or maybe not. Maybe there's no version of this that doesn't break something in the process of exposing the break that was already there. I don't have a clean ending for you. My marriage is almost certainly over. My kids are hurting. Derek is at his brother's house. I'm sleeping in a bed that still smells like someone else's life, the life I had before that Tuesday afternoon in the laundry room when everything changed, and I don't know yet what the next version looks like. What I know is that I'm still here. Still getting up and making breakfast and driving to school and standing in front of my fifth graders and talking about fractions and state capitals and trying to model for them, in some small way, what it looks like to show up even when showing up is hard. I know Rachel is going to show up tomorrow with more soup. I know Marcus asked me last night if we could build a Lego set this weekend, just the two of us, and I said yes, absolutely, let's do it, and I meant it completely. I know Lily came into my room 2 nights ago and got into bed next to me without saying anything, the way she used to when she was little, and we lay there in the dark, and she didn't ask me anything, and I didn't say anything, and eventually we both fell asleep. Those things I know. What I'm still not sure about, what I'm going to be thinking about for a long time, is whether I handled the confrontation the right way. Whether the venue, the timing, the witnesses, were justified given everything that led up to them. Whether a woman who'd been lied to for 8 months and who'd sat in silence for 30 more days while that lie continued had any better option available to her. Or whether the option I chose was always, at its heart, about making him feel even a fraction of what he'd made me feel. Maybe it was both, maybe that's okay, maybe it isn't. I genuinely, truly don't know. So tell me, Reddit. After everything I've just laid out, after everything I've carried and discovered and held, and finally said out loud, aita for confronting my husband's affair at his mother's 70th birthday dinner, in front of his entire family and my own children. Because I have been asking myself that question every single day since I walked out of that restaurant, and I still don't have an answer.